Reading with your kids.
Well, hello there. So great to see you. Come on in, have a seat, take a load off. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We hope that you will take a moment to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, or wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Jodi Darter. She is here to talk about her beautiful book, When You Lived in My Belly. Jodi will be here in just a moment. We do want to take a moment to let you know, to remind you, to invite you to join us at Kids Expo Chicago, February 8th and 9th at the Schaumburg Convention Center in Schaumburg, Illinois. This is going to be a fantastic event, fun for all families. There are hundreds of activities at Kids Expo that your families will love, including the totally interactive Reading with Your Kids booth, where you and your kids can experience what it's like to be a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. In fact, many of the people we meet at the expo are going to be on future episodes of the podcast, and we're real excited about that. I'm also going to be presenting my totally interactive magic show at the expo, and we may invite you and your kids to come up and create some magic live and on stage. It's happening February 8th and 9th, Schaumburg Convention Center, Schaumburg, Illinois. It's Kids Expo. Joining us right now from a little town about 20 minutes away from Reedville that you've never heard of. I've heard of it. You've probably never heard of it. She is the author of a fantastic new book that just earned a Mom's Choice Award. The name of the book is When You Lived in My Belly. Our guest today is Jodi Darter. Jodi, how are you?
So excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited for you to be here, and I really want to know all about When You Lived in My Belly. This is a fascinating this time of life. I remember so well when my kids were living in my wife's belly. It was a magical, crazy, stressful, non-sleeping time. But tell us about the book, please.
Well, that's a great point that you're making right off the bat. You remember that time, and of course, I remember that time, and other moms remember that time, parents. It's so incredibly special when you're developing that innate bond. But the ones you do not remember are the kids. Of course, how could they? Because they're growing. So for me, it was just a no-brainer when my child asked one day, innocently, Mom, what was it like when I lived in your belly? To answer that question. And that's what I did.
What a beautiful inspiration. And I can just, I can hear my son asking, I don't remember him asking my wife, but I could hear his voice asking that, because it's such a complex, we have this picture of my wife when she was carrying my daughter, and my son was 2 years old. And he would go up to my wife's belly and say hi to his sister. Well, we didn't know if it was going to be a sister or not, but he would say hi to his soon-to-be sibling. And so he was able to say, yeah, there's a baby living inside my mom, but I don't know if he was able to process that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's even hard for adults to process this. It actually transpires. It's really a miracle, and it's definitely like the answer to a lot of children's questions. Certainly not in the mindset of you were delivered by stork. This is not that at all. This is celebrating that innate bond established in motherhood. From the first month of all of the milestones are discussed, the developmental milestones that babies reach in utero, and they're coupled with the corresponding physical and emotional changes that are experienced by moms. So all of those relatable moments that we can, at least I can relate to, of course, because I wrote the book, but, early cravings to the baby's first movements to kissing the newborn, all of those are captured in the book and give children a better glimpse about that time that they spent with their moms, so they can pretty much see inside what it was like And the response from them, just from being out on book tour, many dates, has been just phenomenal, because they now get that vivid picture of what they were doing for those 9 months. And if they have a sibling who's, in utero currently, they can get a better idea too, month by month, of what's going on.
Yeah, that was what a wonderful resource that it would have been for us to have this 22 years ago when my son was 2 and we were waiting for my daughter. You bring up the stork, and you obviously don't have an answer to this, but I wonder why human beings came up with this silly notion that a stork flies around and drops a baby down through a chimney instead of sitting down and explaining to kids, that there's a baby, it's growing inside your mom, and helping them understand that.
I mean, I think that some of these topics of conversation can be embarrassing or touchy to some people. Mm-hmm. So I would assume that one of those people just decided, hey, a stork sounds like a better plan of action. Let's go with the stork instead of potentially inviting a conversation about how babies are made.
Okay.
That's, what I could think of, but I'm definitely not a fan of that.
Yeah.
At all. I think that you're missing out on an opportunity to really hone in on a miracle. Mm-hmm. It truly is a miracle, and at all of the months that you spend with your child during that time, of course, I'm not being Pollyanna. There's some not so fun stuff that goes along with it. It's not easy gaining 30 plus pounds, but I digress. But, of course, it's just an incredible time to revisit with your child when they're at an age to understand what it's like. And it reinforces that innate bond that can't be replaced.
Yeah, and I really think it's important for kids to kind of understand that. I mean, I have so much respect for my wife and for all moms out there. It is an incredible sacrifice. And my wife would say, and you would probably say, oh no, but it's, I would do anything for my kid, and I'm happy to have carried my child. And yes, that's just natural, but in so many ways, it's an incredible sacrifice. There's a danger, at least there was a real danger for women carrying babies not so long ago, and it still can be very, very difficult and lead to some complications. I think that that's a pretty important thing for kids when they're able to understand that we loved you so much, your mom loved you so much. This is what she did for you so that you could come to this world and be healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's why I made it a keepsake treasure. I mean, there's pages in there to talk about your individual pregnancy journey at the end, and there's also additional pages to include pictures of your pregnancy or ultrasound photos. I want it to be pretty much a collective journey to take a child back to pregnancy so they better understand, month by month what was happening, but really what went into it on, both ends. Mm-hmm. They were obviously busy inside growing and what was happening with each developmental milestone. And then, of course, on the corresponding changes regarding mothers, what were we doing? We were thinking about decorating your room this month. We were looking at ultrasound and wondering if you were a girl or a boy. I mean, all of these different steps that new parents go through are detailed in it. And the result, I think, is a real bonding experience for mom and child.
Yeah, I really love, and I love that idea that every family can personalize it. And with the ultrasounds and things. Now, is there a place where moms can write in and in the third month, I was really having crazy cravings for this or for that?
Yes. There's definitely a place at the end where you can talk about your individual pregnancy journey. Mm-hmm. And on each page, if you chose to do that, you could. You could write little personal notes on a month-by-month basis. It is broken up by month. But at the end, there's all these additional pages to do that personal work. And I think that it's important to do, too, to give your child not like an artifact, but a real tangible book that, this is you. This is what we went through together, and one that they can keep forever. And I did it to fulfill my mom's dream. My mom died in 2013, and it was always her dream to publish a children's book. Mm-hmm. So I was really taken over by grief, completely despondent for quite some time. And I couldn't think of anything, like even though I'm a writer, I had severe writer's block, about what book I could possibly write in her honor and memory. And when my son serendipitously asked, what was it like when I lived in your belly? That was it. Because both my mom and my son are the only two in the world who know what my heart sounds like from the inside. Mm-hmm. So this is such a labor of love for me personally, because it's in my mom's spirit, inspired by my son's question, illustrated by my best friend since kindergarten. It is an absolute dream come true.
That's amazing. Now, you spoke a little bit about, using the book to help young kids understand what was going on as they grew inside their mom's belly. Use your little imagination a little bit, and because I think that this is you mentioned that this is a keepsake, a family keepsake. Imagine what kind of conversations a mother and child could have when the kid gets a little bit older, when the kid gets into middle school and then into high school, and then maybe is becoming a mom herself.
Yes, absolutely. I think that there's opportunity for it to be used for generations. There's definitely times where you revisit the idea of pregnancy like you just described. Certainly when you're going through it, then when your child has asked those questions, and I honestly don't know any children, at least in my life, who don't have any questions about pregnancy, when they suddenly see moms or their aunts, bellies growing bigger, they have questions. Mm-hmm. So, and then of course when they become pregnant themselves. So that whole life cycle, there's opportunity to revisit the book.
Yeah. And this is, I'm picturing it as you were speaking, and I'm thinking, and I'm using my imagination. I'm imagining a moment in middle school where, maybe mom and child are just about, they walk away from each other because otherwise they're going to be at each other's throats. It's just such a stressful time, and they've forgotten, because of circumstances, they've forgotten how much they love each other because they're so frustrated and fearful or whatever. What a wonderful thing to be able to pull this book out and just sit down on the couch and not even say anything, but just reread this. And I'm thinking of how it could help just kind of alleviate that stress sometimes that we feel and experience with our kids when they're going through middle school and high school and all of that.
Sure. During any times of isolation, or if they're trying to break away from the parent, just bringing them back to where they came from and their roots. Like you said, maybe in a silent way, just letting them know, like, we are bonded for life. And regardless of what you're going through, I'm behind you from the beginning.
Such an important message for our kids to hear when they're young, but also when they're tweens, when they're teens, probably when they're in their 20s and 30s too.
Absolutely. I mean, I have three, as we talked about earlier. I have three kids, one 23, one who's 12, totally teenager. And then, of course, I have a 9-year-old as well. So I have all of the age groups, and it has resonated with all three.
Yeah. Now, you talked about going out and sharing this with groups. Have you done a lot of touring with the book?
I have. I've been really fortunate. Last year, I went on a book tour when it was launched, and I was able to go to several dates in the greater Washington, D.C. area. I had many in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and I have some coming up in 2020. The biggest one would be in New York City on April 25th at the Barnes & Noble in Union Square. So really excited about that.
Wow, that is a big deal, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, very excited. And many other dates, and Philly will be announced soon, and more, of course, in the greater Boston area where I'm from. Hopefully you'll come to one of them.
Absolutely.
Got to shamelessly plug. And in many other states as well. So looking forward to 2020. The book tour date is going to be in anticipation of Mother's Day, which clearly this would be a great Mother's Day gift this year, in my not so humble opinion.
Absolutely. And I am going to, after we get off, I have a soon to be mother that I think I want to share this book with.
Well, I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
There we go. Yes, indeed. So, I know that, When You're in My Belly, that's a fantastic book, and we absolutely think that folks should check it out and consider adding it to their family library. But that's not the only thing that Jodi Darter has written. Where else can people find your writing? And because you do a lot of writing out there.
I do. I am definitely hyper-scheduled, busy mom, like most moms. And you can find me on my website, which is jodidarter.com. And, of course, I have bylines on many websites, including the Huffington Post, Motherly, Scary Mommy, Sway, and many others.
Do you see yourself writing more children's books and going beyond just the topic of motherhood and pregnancy?
Yes, I have a couple of projects in the works. Definitely a children's book, and I'm also writing a book about grief.
Just sitting in our time together talking with each other, you're able to share a lot of really intimate things about yourself. So many things that so many other folks aren't able to even talk about to their closest friends. What is it about you that you're able to kind of open up and help the world by sharing your story?
I used to be an anchor reporter for many years, and I would always say, if people remember people, they don't remember statistics. And if you are willing and able to share stories that have happened to you, you are undoubtedly going to connect with another person who needs to hear it. So I've always made it a priority for myself to share what's happening to me, because there are others who need to hear that they're not alone in this world. It can be very isolating, especially with social media, which of course increases connectivity, but people only show the best parts of themselves on social media. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying, I'm not one of them either. But at the same time, I will dive deep into what's going on in my life regarding paralyzing grief or divorce, the ugliness, the ugly truths of life, because I have connected with other human beings who frankly helped me. It has been this reciprocal relationship for many years. So I have benefited from being more of an open book. And I know that some of my writing has helped others, which is frankly why I write. Mm-hmm. I want to connect with other people. I want them to feel something in this world, which sometimes just gives you that feeling of just being disconnected. So it's the ultimate compliment to me when I receive an email from somebody who says, you know what, this really touched me, and thank you for writing it. Thank you for existing. It's an incredible compliment.
Yeah.
And, by the way, that openness led me to my husband. I wrote an article called Top 10 Rules for Dating a Single or Divorced Mom and submitted it to the Huffington Post. It was a highly tongue-in-cheek referendum on men, basically where I was at that point in my life. And my now husband, read that piece. It was shared on Facebook by one of his friends. And he read the piece and he wound up writing me an email because he understood exactly where I was coming from. He could peel through all of those layers and see, you know what, I get it as a single dad. I understand her worldview. Mm-hmm. And fast forward now 5 years later, and he's my happily ever after. Pretty incredible.
That's wonderful. And, what you're saying is, I guess, in a lot of ways, what we've been talking about here in the Reading with Your Kids podcast, I think one of the power of story, one of the power of sitting down and reading with our kids, whether they're 4 sitting on our laps or co-reading with our middle school kids or our high school kids, is sharing stories about people. And you're not sitting down and lecturing kids or giving them statistics or you don't do this or this is going to happen. You're sitting down having conversations about people or characters that we come to care about in the story. And that makes it much more real for us and makes those lessons and those values that we want to share with our kids much more impactful, I think.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. Without a doubt. And what resonates with them, what speaks to them, I think is vitally important to pursue as well. If something that really speaks to them individually and you may not quite get, it's still developing that love of reading and increasing their comprehension and their vocabulary and doing all of those wonderful things we as parents want them to gain through reading. So I just think having an open mind too about what your child wants to read and then sprinkling in some of those wonderful characters in books that, reinforce that human connection just brings the beauty of reading to the bedroom every night.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've had a wonderful time chatting with the author of When You Lived in My Belly, Jodi Darter. Jodi, thanks so much for being part of our show.
Thank you for having me. It was such a treat.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Lauren Rinaldi. She is going to be talking to us about how we can build an intentional family library, a library that celebrates diversity and invites our kids to get to know folks of other cultures and visit and explore different parts of the world. That's the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Speaking of invitations, I would love to invite any children's author who's listening to the show today to be a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic book. Imagine you can be a guest on an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. It's really simple. All you need to do is go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the contact button that you can find at the bottom of the page. Let us know about your great book. We will let you know the next easy steps. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, we want to thank Jodi Darter. Please be sure to check out When You Lived in My Belly. Also want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. Be sure to check out the blog that she creates for every episode. You can find that at readingwithyourkids.com. Also want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. And please, please, please know how grateful I am that you are taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.